Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, joined today by Nick Farabaugh. I want to talk about why, for both of us, Chris Shula should be and probably is the Steelers' top target. But if they don't get him, what's the plan if that happens? We'll talk about that, what Jay Glazer said about Mike Tomlin that does pertain to the Steelers, and Ben Roethlisberger's thoughts on when the Steelers should go get their quarterback in the draft, all here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh. He's back for PennLive.com. We got a lot to talk about as far as the coaching search. Some in-person interviews. Brian Flores got the in-person interview. Anthony Weaver's scheduled for Friday. I believe Mike McCarthy's scheduled for today, Wednesday. So there's some things on the dockets there, but we know the Steelers can't talk to Chris Shula until Monday. And I've seen a lot of online opinions and not just online, but other national beat opinions that think that the Steelers are prioritizing Mike McCarthy and or Brian Flores. But Nick, I don't know about you. I don't think they should, nor do I think they are. I think that Chris Shula is their top target. They're waiting to talk to him and Nate Shieldhouse next Monday when they first become available. And I think that that's going to be when either he makes the decision or they do.
Yeah, I think that one thing is they're not going to make a decision before right. Shieldhouse and Shula get in-person interviews. Now, here's the thing. They can make a hire as early as Friday because Anthony Weaver's coming in. That will make them Rooney Rule compliant, so they could make the hire as early as then. They're not going to, though, I don't think. And I think, only three in-person interviews would be too light. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't have more virtual interviews than the 7 they did. And don't forget, Flores and McCarthy, this is their first interview with the Steelers. They did not have virtuals with the Steelers. It's not like they're in a second interview, right? So there is that to be considered too. And Art Rooney said it was going to take weeks. We are only 1 week into this thing. I think they're going to be patient for Shula. And Shula fits what they've done the last 3 times. Not necessarily that they have to do what they did the last 3 times, but he's a young, up-and-coming defensive assistant. He's got a really good access to good branches of the McVay tree. And the cool thing about Shula to me that makes a lot of sense with him is, like Mike Tomlin, he's been around the block for a while. He's been an NFL coach for a decade plus. Even though he's 39 years old, he's young. He's been around. He came into the league under Chuck Pagano, and he's been with McVay since 2017. And the one thing I really love about Shula is, Chris, he's coached every single position on the defense. Yeah. He's coached outside linebackers, inside linebackers, secondary, defensive line. He's coached all of those. And every single year he's coached those. Some guy has had a breakout season. Some guy has taken a leap in their development. You have seen him take those guys and turn them into really good playmakers, and then he gets more out of what he has. And I think the Steelers' plan is at the very least to get those guys in the building. And sure, I think Flores, has a legit shot at this job. I don't think that. I think he might be fallback 1, honestly, if that's what we're talking about, fallbacks. I think he's got a legit chance to inch his way into this job. But I personally speaking, Chris, I don't really buy the Mike McCarthy noise. He doesn't really fit what they like. I honestly thought, when McCarthy came in, was it, an interview that put McCarthy on the map and was helping him out? Sure. I also thought maybe if they hire a young coach, you can maybe convince Mike McCarthy to come onto the staff in some respect, and maybe be a kind of guy that's been there and done that for a while. But to me, I agree with you. I think that it is a fallback type plan. I think Shula or Shieldhouse are the plans personally.
I want to call back to something that you addressed. He coached the linebackers. Chris Shula, that is, coached the linebackers, the outside linebackers, the D-backs. So he's been there. Actually, it does seem like he didn't coach D-line, but that's not the that's not the point there. I think the point is that this guy's been around the block, and he kind of moved around. I think what I really appreciate about that, he moved around all in Sean McVay's team. Like he did the different things, almost like he was picking up experience with each position. I kind of like that idea. I kind of like him being part of that and getting that experience. And now he, like you said, he's been around for a while. He started coaching in the NFL at 29 years old back in 2015. So like that's how long his experience goes back. So he's coming to you semi young. And again, not like 35, like, Mike Tomlin and some other guys like Bill Cowher when they came in, but he's coming into you just before he turns 40. If you hire him before February 2nd, I think it is, whatever his February 5th is his birthday. But again, age is just a number. It's just the point is you want a younger guy who's going to come with innovation, who's going to come with his own plans, his own ideals to take the Steelers where he wants to take them. And like you said, connections are going to be important. And that to me is something that I think could be really interesting for the Steelers if he's able to have that kind of a pull. One, the Steelers dipping back into a lineage when it comes to things. Chris Shula, I mean, he's literally grandfathered into the NFL. So like,
yes,
there's something there to that as well. I think that if you're being honest about it, is that the connections that he's going to have. I remember there was a segment Bomani Jones did on a show he had on HBO Max about coaching trees and how so much of it is just literally who you know and who you know to get other people jobs. And like he said, like the one person who just didn't believe in like the lineage stuff when it came to coaching was Mike Tomlin. He got his own guys. He operated that way, but everyone else, there was a tie to someone's son, someone's grandson, someone's nephew, and getting those things done. Shula would be of that ilk. So I think that would be interesting. I want to also bring up real quick Anthony Weaver before we move on to McCarthy and Flores to wrap up here. But Weaver's another guy who he did the D line. He's done run game coordination. He's done linebackers. He's a guy that I think embraces the whole physicality thing and being physical. Now he's a bit older. He's 45. He'll be 46 in August. But I wonder, where do you rank him if we were to say Shula, Weaver, Flores, McCarthy? I feel like Minter's kind of out at this point because we haven't even heard his name in the interview process since the initial start here. And maybe it pops up again. Maybe they do one next week. But where do you, if you were like to kind of rank the tiers as far as where the Steelers should be looking at, who do you got?
I like Anthony Weaver maybe more than most people do. When I talk with people around the league, they tell me Dan Campbell-ish is what he kind of profiles as. He's kind of a guy that I think a lot of people around the league thinks has been almost downtrodden with just poor circumstances around him rather than necessarily him being a bad coach. The scheme is certainly innovative compared to what he has gotten out of the results. I think a lot of people around the league feel like with more talent, he's going to be able to really produce something. The one thing I would say to that is why he's not over Shula is Shula has the lowest paid defense in football right now and is producing a very good defense. And so I think that in and of itself puts Shula over him for me, but like, I'd rather have Anthony Weaver than Mike McCarthy. Like, that's truly what I would rather have. I think Weaver has a background that fits. He's the guy that's going to light up the room and it's just going to really draw you in. He's a leader. You want to run through a brick wall for him. Listen to some of his speeches just from, behind the scenes stuff. That's a guy that you want to play for. I can imagine if I was a player for the Dolphins, I'd be hyped up to play for Anthony Weaver as my coach. So to me, I think I'm probably somewhere with Shula as one, and then probably Flores and then Weaver and then McCarthy. That's where I'm at. I think personally speaking, Weaver has some intriguing qualities because I don't think, from what I've kind of heard, if he comes in to an organization, he's going to be more that CEO type, and you're going to have your own independent DC and OC, those guys running the show, just like Dan Campbell does. He's not a Dan Campbell tree guy, but that's the comp right now from around the league. And I think that's a really just interesting style of coach. But you can't tell me right now if someone told you, could you see Dan Campbell coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers? Yeah, you could, right? He fits a lot of what they would like. And so a Dan Campbell-ish guy, someone in that vein, I think fits what the Steelers like in a lot of ways. So I'm not shocked he's getting a second interview. I think he fits a lot of what they've liked in the past.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's things I like about him. I think that I harken back to how physical the Dolphins were in the early portion of that Steelers-Dolphins game and how they flew to the ball, they hit. If he brings an intensity like that at Dan Campbell, that could be interesting because, again, they're looking for the top of the room. But But right with you on that. I think Flores and McCarthy. I think McCarthy much less so. Like you. I think that there's something else there when it comes to when it comes to McCarthy. But I do think Flores is a potential fallback for if we don't get the young guy that we want to be our future. We can get this guy who has been with us before. We know he knows us, and he can do something here. And I wonder if they don't get their top guy, does that shorten the leash of whoever they get to bring there? We talked about this with Alan Saunders yesterday. He doesn't think so. He thinks that whoever comes in is going to get 3 years at least to put together competitive football. Like if they come in and they tank, that's fine. But if they come in and they tank for 3 straight years and they don't make the playoffs, then that's a different story. But again, the Steelers haven't had that since the early years of Chuck Noll. And again, that was because Chuck Noll was fixing a lot and created the greatest dynasty we know in football. So what say you about the leash or the plans for if it's not Shula, what the other guy might get?
If it's not Shula, I mean, if you hire McCarthy, that's a win now hire to me. That's not a build later hire. Flores, I think, fits into both of those. Feels like to me you're trying to split it, right? You're trying to do what you did with Mike Tomlin, which is you're trying to win now because you think Flores can elevate you schematically. He's a really hard game manager. There's a lot of things there with Brian Flores. I'm sure, you pulled the players on the Steelers right now. A lot of them would want Flores just because of the familiarity with them. And so that to me is what Flores is kind of splitting it. McCarthy's a win now hire. And the big concern I have with Mike McCarthy is he really does feel like you're just running your tires in mud. It doesn't feel like you're stepping out of your comfort zone. It doesn't feel like you're doing much else. Yeah, he's an offensive coach, but his scheme, was innovative when he was first hired. But it's become a little bit stale. I mean, look at his teams in Dallas, and the schematics were not the reason they scored a lot of points. Because Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and those skill players, along with an elite offensive line, were just that much better than people. And so McCarthy has also, and this is another concern of mine, when you look at his teams, Favre into Rodgers into Dak, he has never had a non-franchise quarterback. He'd be walking into a position where he does not have that franchise quarterback. Now, maybe it convinces Rodgers to come back for a year. Okay.
Right.
What after that, right? Like, there's a lot of things that go there. So I just have too many questions with the Mike McCarthy thing. It's too much of a win-now move to me. For a team that doesn't need to necessarily be making win-now moves, I'm not saying that they need to rebuild. I'm just saying that I'm not sure you need to hire a guy like Mike McCarthy, who I think you would bring in if you had everything set up and you said, you know what we need is a winning pedigree. We need someone that comes in and does this, and this. He doesn't fit that to me. He would make more sense in a place like Tennessee. I know Saleh got hired there, but he would make sense there for a young quarterback like Cam Ward, something like that, where they need a culture builder that can elevate the standard. The Steelers don't necessarily need that right now. They need somebody, I think, that is fresh, gives them a new perspective, and resets the ideals a little bit into their own mold to modernize it a little bit.
There you have it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jay Glazer had some thoughts on Fox Sports yesterday that kind of interesting on one Mike Tomlin, but also his thoughts on the Steelers. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this show is brought to you by Drip Drop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay up on top of it, my energy, my focus, my mood level all go up. But let's be real. Plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clearer focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. I love that it uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Drip Drop's science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro teams because it rehydrates you faster and more effectively than water alone. They have flexible subscription options, so you're never stuck without it, whether you're hitting the gym, juggling work, or just staying consistent with your goals. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. We're also brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade over play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter with Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, Jay Glazer, of course, known Mike Tomlin whisperer. They've been very close over the years. Jay Glazer indicated yesterday that he does believe that Mike Tomlin does not want to return to coaching. There's no plan for it right now, echoing what Art Rooney said actually a week ago today when he spoke about Mike Tomlin stepping down. And he also said a few other things about the Steelers in how he sees the Steelers as an organization that needs some repatching, because he said that Mike Tomlin covered up a lot of problems that they have, and particularly in the dollars spent side. But let's get to the first period. And this is something we talked about last week because we weren't sure about the Tomlin situation. And if Mike Tomlin were to return to coaching, it would be something that could help the Steelers because then they could trade him away. But you and I were talking about last week, we weren't sure if the Steelers indefinitely retained his rights or if that was a thing that the years told on. But the more and more we reached out, the more and more we've asked questions. And also my colleague Jared Dulac reported as such, Mike Tomlin's time where the Steelers have rights over him does end after the 2027 season. So if the Steelers are going to trade him, he would need to come back next year. It's already too late. He's missing the boat this year. He's not coming back right now. If he comes back next year, it's active. But after that, it's a wrap. And the Steelers, if he comes back in 2028, fine. But it does sound like Jay Glazer is indicating what Art Rooney indicated. Mike Tomlin, he's fine, and he doesn't really need it right now.
Yeah, and who knows if he's going to do TV or just chill. I mean, it doesn't matter. But that, I think, the significant thing is Steelers cannot bank on a significant haul of picks for Mike Tomlin. I think that's the key here is, that would have been a really big boost. Maybe it still happens, but the difference between Tomlin's contract and where Sean Payton was is I think Sean Payton had like 3 or 4 years on his deal. So, he could have come back significantly later than Mike T. And the Steelers, specifically when they were going to trade Mike T, if they trade him next year, that team's only inquiring 1 year of a contract. So they're going to have a new deal and different things, which adds different layers to a trade and everything of the sort. So I'm not surprised Mike Tomlin is stepping away for a while, if forever. That he has been there, done that, Chris.
Yeah.
He's a gold jacket coach. He doesn't have anything to prove in that respect. If he wants to, he can walk into Canton 4 years from now, and that'll be that. And so I do think you look at that and you say, I think Mike Tomlin doesn't have to do anything if he doesn't want to. Now, maybe he gets the itch for the right job. Maybe there's a position that opens up that he wants to come back, and he gets the itch to coach. But he just looked tired, man. I keep telling, people that ask me about this, why did he step away? And I think a big part of it was just like us, he saw the same thing happen over and over and over and over again, right? It gets old to him too, man. He's done so much to try and change things. He's brought different quarterbacks in, different OCs in, different personnel all around the team, and the same thing is happening. And I think at some point Mike also went and said, maybe this team is a little bit better off without me, and I don't need to just drag myself into the ground every single year. He doesn't have much to prove. What's there to chase for him? If he doesn't want to. If the fuel, the love isn't there for him, there's no reason for him to coach. He's made his money. He's won a Super Bowl. He's going to be in Canton. He only needs to come back for the spot he wants to come back for. And so I'm not surprised that he might not come back, period.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. There was the part of me that thought, hey, maybe he's thinking maybe he's thinking of like, hey, I'll step away for a bit and see how I feel it. But something I brought up, just personal experience, like my dad was a coach for a very long time at the high school level. and it was like, I thought he'd get right back into coaching right away too. But one thing he said, like, it's different when you have a when you have your fall afternoons, to be able to do something, and not just on Sunday, but like every day during the week. And again, that's a high school coach. I mean, Mike Tomlin is there in the morning, in the day, in the evening, coaching and planning and talking and coordinating and making sure. And he can't just he's not just setting up the plays. He's making sure everybody knows what they got to know and figuring out where are the deficiencies in my team. And then when he's not doing that, he's planning for the future. He's reading. Adam Schefter's talked about how, like, during the draft trail, he's reading everything he can about every single player, every report that they can get from their scouting office. He's doing everything he can. And that, to me, that's a lot. And when you realize you can step away and you can kind of live life a little bit, it's different, especially when, what can be said to Mike Tomlin? He's a Super Bowl champion. He's a two-time AFC champion. He never had a losing season. He's going into the Hall of Fame, like you said. I know there's some people that don't like to hear that, but it's a fact. He's just going. It's going to happen. The voters are going to put him in there. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion as soon as his time, tolls to be, eligible for the Hall of Fame. So, I think that's the thing here, and it's unfortunate for the Steelers because now he's going to be, without if he's doing that and he's not, and he does stay away, you don't recoup the picks that you could have for Mike Tomlin. And if you did recoup the picks for him, that could be a first round pick in there somewhere, and that could be the stuff that helps you get, a future quarterback. Especially if we're talking for the 2027, season for him to coach, 2027 draft. If it would have happened ahead of time. So like, I think it's unfortunate for the Steelers. It's a missed opportunity. Not one of anyone's particular making, except maybe fans that tried to that made it less comfortable for Mike. But I still think personally, Mike came to this decision on his own long before. I think he was kind of just like, hey, you know what? I've seen the dog and pony show. I've been around the block. I'm gonna step aside here. I'm gonna do my own thing. And we've already seen he's in Georgia celebrating his daughter, doing gymnastics there. As probably at Georgia. He's living life, and I think that's going to be what's interesting. Is that what he wants? It seems like Jay Glazer saying that. That's another thing. But Nick, before we move on, I want to just touch back on what Jay Glazer kind of said about the Steelers organization. Is this, the way he posed it was like Mike Tomlin solved a lot of issues that the Steelers didn't need him to solve. How hard is it going to be for a new coach to walk in, figure out those problems, and keep them from becoming the problems that Mike Tomlin was able to do it to keep the Steelers afloat in the many years that he did?
Yeah, it's going to be a big thing. I guess the one thing the coach might try is, can you open up the purse strings a little bit more for assistant coaches? I think that's the big thing. The Steelers always have had one of the smaller staffs in the league. And Art Rooney, every time he's questioned about it, says that he doesn't think there needs to be a bigger staff. But especially, and I'll say this, especially if the Steelers are going to hire someone from the McVay tree, look at McVay's staff. He has positions on top of positions on top of positions. You think Chris Shula coming in isn't going to want a pass game coordinator? Like, you sure? I guarantee he's going to want one. And on that squad, they have, they've had defensive pass game coordinators. They have different guys to get them raises. The checkbook's going to have to be increased there. And I think that's one thing when you look at that. The facilities, that's going to be something I'm sure a new coach is going to want. I think a lot of coaches in the league are probably going to want their new practice facility. I'm sure the Steelers are probably going to do that soon enough anyways, because I think that it needs to happen. You and I are down there enough, Chris. They probably need their own facility at some point soon. It's just getting crammed, and I don't think the Steelers want to put in so much money into that facility if they're going to build a new one sooner rather than later. So, like, those are the start of things. One thing I will say is that I do think that head coach is going to have the ability to make their stamp. I do think that's one thing that at least the Steelers org is open to. Mike clearly made his stamp in the org and kind of made it Mike Tomlin's best vision of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Anyone that's able to get that head coaching job, I don't think is going to be squashed down to not be their true selves, to not necessarily, spread their wings and have control over roster moves and things of that nature. I don't think that that's going to be a part of that. And so there's positives to that too, but definitely those two things, the facilities, things like assistant coaches, how much money can you spend there? Those are going to be important things for a new coach, especially if you want to build an expansive staff.
Exactly. There's got to be resources. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to Nick about something Ben Roethlisberger said about his opinion on when the Steelers should go after their quarterback. And I want to get Nick's sense on this quarterback class, future quarterback classes, and what the Steelers should be doing there. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter and Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I'll remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. The conference championship round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack in every NFL playoff game day. We're also brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites because Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I ever needed someone to hire someone to help me edit this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very, very specific about what I need, real experience and not a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get $75 sponsored job credit and help you give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL to get $75 in sponsored job credit. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here with Nick Farabaugh. Nick, let's do a few things here. Ben Roethlisberger discussed, his plan or his thoughts or outlook on the Steelers quarterback situation on his podcast this week, and recently said something to the effect that the Steelers, should wait 2 or 3 more years because he said you shouldn't try to build around the quarterback. You should build something and then add the quarterback. Now, Nick, this is just me, but ain't that what the Steelers have been trying to do the past few years, especially since Omar Khan took over? The drafting of an offensive line. Now they're trying to replenish the defensive trenches. You see the young core that they've developed on defense with Porter, Benton, Harmon, Queen, all the other guys that they have there. Nick, is it me or is that like an already in progress thing?
Feels like that's what they've been trying to do. I mean, they could have very easily selected a quarterback in 2024 and traded up in that class that was 5 deep. They could have traded up for Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy. They could have tried to get up in front of the Falcons for Penix. Like, they could have tried to make a very bold move up the board that year because that was a deep QB class. Instead, they took Troy Faltano. Instead, they took Zach Frazier. Instead, they took Mason McCormick and built up the offensive line. So I agree with you that they have been doing that. They built up the defensive line. I'm assuming they're finally going to add a wide receiver too this year.
Yes,
Lord help us, please. Let's hope.
Yeah.
And
I'm
assuming that right. Just keeps happening. I'm assuming that's going to happen. So the weaponry is going to be in check. You have a duo of running backs. I think they're going to be very eager to bring back Kenneth Gainwell. All that is in place. I think to me, the other thing that I don't love about that rationale is, you know what? How many good quarterback classes really are there every decade?
Yeah.
2 or 3?
Right.
And so I think in an ideal world, you can say, yes, you would rather build the O-line and the wide receiver room and all that out before the quarterback comes in. But man, if you're in a position to get the quarterback, you got to take the quarterback. Like, you just have to. sometimes you're not going to draft a quarterback into ideal circumstances, but if you have the right coaching staff, if you have the right surroundings for it, you feel like that guy's still going to be able to turn into something good. And to me, the Steelers are in a spot where they're not even at that point yet. They are at a point where they've already built a good group of players. They have, I think, 3 offensive linemen that they can really rely on in the future. They have a wide receiver 1. They have a few tight ends that are in there. They have 2 running backs. Like, they have pieces here offensively that you feel like you have that you can build around a young quarterback. So this idea to wait 2 or 3 more drafts makes no sense to me, because what is being accomplished there? I understand if his take was, you know what, I don't like the 2026 class, which is a completely fair take, because right now it's kind of Mendoza and then Ty Simpson and then just drops off a cliff. Fine. I get it. 2027 looks more promising. Maybe you get a really good class there. And if that class is as good as people think it's going to be right now, we don't know, because look at how people thought the 2026 class was going to be. Mm-hmm. If it is as good as people think it's going to be, then the Steelers would be fools to not take a quarterback in that class. Just like they would have been fools to not take a quarterback in this class if it had been as deep as people thought it was going to be. And so, yeah, to me, I think the rationale there is very much ideal world rather than real world. And so the Steelers, to me, you can't wait 3 more drafts. At some point, you have to take the swing at quarterback. You just have to. Either whether it's in the draft or you have to take a swing at some significant trade if that ever comes about. At some point, the swing has to be made. It just can't keep getting pushed back every single year.
I'm right with you. Eventually, you take the shot, but again, you want to make it a good shot. You want to make it take a reasonable shot. I think you go back to the Kenny Pickett season. We were talking about on this show, and you can go back saying maybe this is probably the year to wait. Maybe see if the C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young year would be the year to go after your quarterback. But go after a playmaker or a trench guy. That year was my thoughts, and they brought Kenny Pickett in. And again, Kenny Pickett obviously got a lot of issues on top of that. He is not turned out into a franchise quarterback. He's been given multiple other chances. It hasn't worked out. But it didn't help that you didn't have the developed O-line around him, the other, kind of making him a puzzle piece that you could just plug in and just be part of something that was already developing. Again, that's what benefited Ben Roethlisberger in his young career. When he came in early, he had Jeff Hardings, he had Alan Faneca, he had Marvel. He had a really good offensive line, a developed run game, several weapons, at wide receiver. They added Heath Miller the next year, and he had a defense that was really good. And then in the late 2000s, Mike Tomlin, that really good defense turned into a great defense because they kept ranking number 1 in everything, year after year. So if you're the Steelers, I agree that Ben Roethlisberger, this prospect is that develop the team and get your quarterback. But to your point, if you get that shot now, I think that they're in a position they can take that shot and they will have the horses to run with a really good quarterback. And part of it is I think they gotta draft well this year. Wide receiver 2 is important. I think safety is really important this year. I wouldn't be shocked if they dip back into defensive line at some point because Cam Hayward is going to age out at some point, and it just seems like he doesn't. But it's coming. And I wouldn't be shocked at other moves here. I also think the Steelers could be really big players in the trade market on draft day or for the draft because they have 12 picks right now projected to be, and 12. They're not making 12 draft picks. We know that much. So I think that I agree that you want to develop the team, but again, this is a team that's won 10 games 3 years in a row while shuffling through quarterbacks. They've made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years while doing that. I think that they kind of have a developing core that's going to support a young quarterback. So maybe not this year, because I agree with you. Fernando Mendoza would be great, but he's going first overall or whatever. He's going to be way too high up. I'm not a Ty Simpson guy. I know you aren't either. But so wait on this year, but make some other really good draft picks this year, next year, if that is the year, and Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, if there's like 5 dudes down the list, get aggressive, go get who you want.
I will say this: I agree with you that they have, I think, enough pieces to take a shot and try and get a guy at this point, a quarterback. I don't think they have the most important piece yet, though, And the most important piece yet is a play caller you trust with a young quarterback. I think that's the
Way to
one
bring it
thing
full
they're missing.
circle, Nick Farabaugh.
Right. I really think because listen, I was never a Kenny Pickett round one guy. I watched him at Pitt for 5 years. And so I knew a lot about Kenny Pickett. And I thought he was a good day 2 prospect, but taking him in the first round, whatever. But they put that man in a bad spot. Matt Canada was a terrible OC. He had a patchwork offensive line that was not good. And he had volatile wide receivers. And that is not a recipe for a young quarterback. Even though I don't think Pickett's ceiling was franchise quarterback, they did not put a young quarterback, period. They could have plopped anyone in there, and it would not have been an ideal scenario for that quarterback to be plopped into. Right now, I think that they have a lot of things set up much better than they did then. I think that they have a better group of weapons sans the wide receiver room. I think they need to build that up significantly this offseason. Should be the number one project this year outside of quarterback is figure out what to do with wide receiver, make sure that's not a weakness. But they need that offensive play caller, man. That is such an important thing for young quarterbacks. Look at quarterbacks that flourish when they are young and when they are at their best. You know, everyone counted Trevor Lawrence to the wayside, I feel like, before this year, but Liam Cohen came in and really kind of revived Trevor Lawrence's career in a lot of ways. If he had Liam Cohen when he was younger, you can imagine the things that would happen. I just think young quarterbacks develop extremely well and develop in a different way when they have play callers that you can trust with young quarterbacks in development. And so that's the one thing they need. That's outside of wide receiver, obviously, that is the clear thing they need. So this hire, whether it is an offensive coach or the OC hire for the next young quarterback, has to be very important. That is, I think having a weaponized elite offensive play caller is such a valuable thing in today's NFL. So it's just a huge thing that they're just missing right now, and we'll see if they can find it.
Absolutely. Nick, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at FarabaughFB. You can find my stuff at PennLive.com/Steelers and check out the YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz on PennLive.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. You can find me on social media, wherever you get social media, at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of the daily episodes of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back here tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.